2025. How much stuff will be a top 4 to 5 quarterback at the NFL level, presumably meaning he will dethrone one of Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, maybe even a fellow division mate, Justin Herbert, who, although it hasn't translated to postseason success as a Charger thus far with Jim Harbaugh, it feels like it's the closest that they've been to that. And he's somebody that clearly tests off the charts from a physical standpoint and an intangible standpoint at the quarterback position. So that's the bar that Sean Payton has set for his Denver Broncos and for his quarterback in Bo Nix. And there was a lot of backlash and pushback and reaction to those comments. We talked about it yesterday and earlier this week, where you had people here in Broncos country saying that they didn't like that. That's not the mentality, the mindset that they want their head coach here in town to have. And it should be, working in silence and grinding away and keeping your eye on the prize and proving that you can do something while acting like you've been there before. I certainly had my thoughts on it and pushed back on those members of Broncos country who felt that way, as I am fully embracing the mentality and the mantra and the mindset of Sean Payton here as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, because I think, one, that is who he truly is. And if the Walton Penner ownership group felt that he is the man for the job, then we here in town should embrace that and allow him to be who he is. You have to take the baby with the bathwater, and you can't have the pedigree and the resume and the experience and the quarterback connection that a guy like Sean Payton brings to the table, but then a la carte say you want that without any of the other stuff that may come with it. And so I'm all in on that mentality and that mindset, because that's what Sean Payton was brought here to do. He was brought here to bring the Broncos back to the annals and the tier among NFL teams that they existed before, where under the Pat Bowlen ownership group, they had more Super Bowl appearances than losing seasons. And that began to decline as Pat Bowlen's health, unfortunately, began to decline. And he stepped back and took further and further distance from the team, which was then entrusted to a trust of people headed by Joe Ellis, a former CEO and team president. And it really coincided with the worst stretch of Broncos football in the history of their franchise. But Sean Payton was supposed to be the final cog in that machine in terms of a front office structure that helped the Broncos return to those lofty goals and return to having the expectation placed upon them that this fan base, this town, and this state has grown used to. So in my mind, if that's what he was brought in here to do, and in his 2 seasons thus far heading into year 3, the way that he has walked the walk behind the talk that he's made tells me that he should be allowed and able to speak confidently and freely about a team that he feels like is getting closer and materializing the vision that he was brought in here to do. But it's not just Sean Payton who has gone and talked highly about the Broncos to basically anyone in the national media that would listen. You've got the regulars of Colin Cowherd, Chase Daniel, Diana Rossini. You've got Albert Breer gushing poetically on the Rich Eisen show about how Bo Nix is the real deal and the Broncos are coming, whether the rest of the NFL likes it or not. It's not even just national media members. So we've gone from Sean Payton to national media members who come to town and watch things. And we now have learned, thanks to fantasy guru Matthew Berry of ESPN, that thought and mindset and belief is permeating into other NFL front offices around the league. Bo Nix was voted 64th overall in the NFL's top 100 list heading into the 2025 season by his peers. And thanks to Matthew Berry, who had a sit-down conversation recently, said he spoke to a high-ranking Chiefs official, and this is what that conversation sounded like. Quote, "I was having a conversation with a very high-ranking Chiefs somebody in the Chiefs organization," is the way I want to phrase it. And they said, honestly, we're worried about the Broncos. They're like, Bo Nix is for real, and that defense is amazing. We think the Broncos are real. In their division, the Chiefs have a lot of respect for the Broncos. This is a Kansas City Chiefs organization that is coming off of 3 consecutive Super Bowl appearances, 2 of which they won. Now, the most recent one, they got spanked by the Philadelphia Eagles. But that is Matthew Berry, who is not a hot take artist. He is not a slouch. He is very, very well connected in the NFL and in the national media. He's somebody who's carved out a decades-long, lengthy, and illustrious career in the sports media industry. And there is no reason that Matthew Berry would feel the confidence or the need to put that out there if the intel that he wasn't getting from that very high-ranking somebody within the Chiefs organization, if it wasn't for real. And the best part is, not only do I believe it, but I think it's justified. I think NFL teams should begin to fear the Denver Broncos going into 2025. Basically, for all the reasons that Matthew Berry there laid out. Oh, you thought this defense was good last year? Which they were. Now, they had some dips throughout the season due to injury, and they went up against some pretty elite-level quarterbacks that all happened to play in the AFC, and 2 of which happened to play in the AFC West. So it wasn't 100% dominance all the way through, but it was pretty damn good. And if you thought they were good last year, wait till they get Alex Singleton back from injury. Wait till Nick Bonito gets to be on top of and further ride the wave that started last season where he was 3rd in the NFL in sacks with 13.5. Wait till Jonathan Cooper on the other side of that pass rushing duo, who is having a stellar training camp and preseason thus far in terms of ramping up to the 2025 season, and it just hasn't been talked about all that much. Wait till Dre Greenlaw gets to town and gets with Bo Lowry and company and is able to mitigate so many of the health issues that have derailed portions of his career, where when healthy, he's one of the better starters at his position in the NFL. Oh, yeah, and then Talanoa Hufanga, a former All-Pro, first-team All-Pro at the safety spot, giving them from the pass rush to the interior defensive line with Zach Allen to the middle linebacker duo headed by Dre Greenlaw, and now Talanoa Hufanga and Brandon Jones in the safety position. Power and stamina and strength and playmaking at all 3 levels. Haven't even mentioned the reigning Defensive Player of the Year in Patrick Surtain opposite a healthy Riley Moss with Jaquan McMillan and first-round draft pick Jahdae Barron. So you thought this defense was good last year? Just wait. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs are thinking the exact same thing. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you got a sophomore Bo Nix who has another full off season under Sean Payton, learning that offense, being able to expand his toolbox and his bag. And then he gets upgraded skill position players alongside him. Cortland Sutton locked in and paid and happy. Further development and growth from Marvin Mims, Devon Vele, and Troy Franklin, who again is having a pretty stellar training camp leading into this preseason. You've got 2 new running backs in the building to bring balance that was sorely lacking last season in J.K. Dobbins, the presumed starter, and R.J. Harvey. And then Evan Ingram to be the joker, to be the person in the face of a tight end room that was abysmal last year before his arrival, but somebody who I can tell you with my own eyes, as someone who's been out to every training camp practice thus far this offseason, is going to eat. Evan Ingram is going to eat across the middle of that field, and he is going to be a perfect security blanket, secret weapon, chess piece for Bo Nix to be able to move around the field as Sean Payton and he see fit. So I absolutely think that the Kansas City Chiefs are starting to fear and worry a little bit more about the Denver Broncos. I think the rest of the NFL, if Matthew Berry were to talk to other high-ranking officials in the AFC West, in the AFC, and maybe those who have the Broncos on the docket this year, would express similar sentiments. You know why? Because it's warranted and it's justified. Are the Denver Broncos going to go out and win a Super Bowl in 2025? I don't know. Probably not. Odds are there's only one team that does it, so odds are pretty stacked against you in that regard. But I'll tell you this, there is a lot more momentum and potential for a leap and a progression forward than a regression backward with this Denver squad under Sean Payton. He did ruffle some feathers, he being Sean Payton, this week, as he has for a handful of years, and it's not something that other NFL teams are certainly immune to, which is the releasing of the initial depth chart and the reading and overreading that comes into the placement of the players along those lines at each one of their positions. And we, the fans, and we, the media, certainly want to gobble information like that up because it's something that is tangible and on paper and on record about where this team is going to start with the preseason just a couple of days away this weekend as the Broncos are in Santa Clara, joint practicing with the 49ers literally right now. But Sean Payton's first depth chart is not one to overly read into positively or negatively. And I think that was evidenced by the placement of who we expect to be some key contributors. Starting with the offensive side of the ball, how about the fact that R.J. Harvey was listed 6th on the Broncos depth chart at running back position? Yeah, the guy they just drafted 60th overall in the second round to be the future at the running back position for them, prior to them even bringing on J.K. Dobbins, he's listed 6th on the Broncos depth chart. Then you've got Lucas Krull, who could be on the bubble, but he could be on the bubble just about as much as several other people in that room, from Nate Atkins. Sean Payton loves himself some Adam Troutman, so maybe not there. Marvin Mims being the wide receiver 2. Are we going to read too much into that? He was kind of the wide receiver 2 by production last year, but he doesn't really fit that mold, in my opinion. And he is somebody that I think with the arrival of Evan Ingram will be relegated more to a wide receiver 3 kind of role and be able to be the Riddler, the baby Joker, the outside version of that chess piece that Evan Ingram is going to be. So Marvin Mims has just as much claim to be the wide receiver 2 as just about anybody, from Devon Vele to the aforementioned Troy Franklin. And while I don't think this player is on the wide receiver 2 radar, I want to say this. Keep an eye on number 5 out there for the Denver Broncos in Trent Sherfield. This is a guy who, when the free agent signing was announced a couple of months ago, it was very, very, very widely kind of speculated that this is a special teams replacement for a guy like Tremon Smith, who was a core 4 special teamer and somebody who was a demon in that phase of the football game. And this was something that Trent Sherfield was supposedly ready to replace. And I think that he will. But I'll say this. That's a dude that's caught a lot of balls so far in training camp. And he's looked pretty good out there. Good enough that there's a strong part of me that thinks even if he's brought in and makes this team as the wide receiver 6 on the back end of that room, that's a guy who could catch 20 plus, I don't know, catches per year, 20 plus balls from Bo Nix going into the 2025 season. I don't have in front of me what the average wide receiver 6 or 6th pass catcher on a roster normally gets, but I do know that when I watch Trent Sherfield out there, he doesn't look like a guy that's simply labeled as a special teams filler and replacement for somebody that walked last offseason. Guy looks like a really good wide receiver. All right. On the defensive side of the ball, again, certain things that you want to look into and speculate on when it comes to the defense. You've got your obvious candidates there on the interior defensive line, Zach Allen, DJ Jones, John Franklin Myers, who we'll see what the situation looks like with him. But really, the biggest focal point on defense in terms of curiosity and intrigue comes at the inside linebacker room with the addition of Dre Greenlaw, plus the injuries to Drew Sanders and the elevation of guys like Justin Sternad and Lavelle Bailey there. So that front four seems to make a lot of sense, but it does push a guy like Drew Sanders potentially down far enough to where he could struggle, especially as he comes back from injury, to have solid footing going into the 2025 season. You've also got the safety room with Talanoa Hufanga coming in to slot alongside Draymond Jones. Again, just pushes everything further down that depth chart. PJ Locke and Devon Key being the key backups in that role, which pushes another recent draft pick in JL Skinner further and further down the depth chart. And then you have guys like Delaren Turner-Yell, who have had opportunities to contribute and concede roles and just haven't quite been able to grasp onto it. So again, not as much to read into in terms of taking this depth chart as gospel, but something to keep in mind as we go forward. And an offensive position battle that I think will rely somewhat heavily on special teams is the running back room. And when it comes to that third running back spot, because I promise you, RJ Harvey's not going to be the 6th running back on this depth chart. I think that goes without saying. So if it's J.K. Dobbins and RJ Harvey as your 1-2 punch, that number 3 running back spot, like we've talked about all offseason long, is going to be a battle. And depending on how many they keep, which if they're going to keep Michael Burton, and we know Sean Payton loves his fullbacks, then that really feels like 3's the number, and that 4th running back spot is going to be heavily predicated as a practice squad guy and a potential call-up handful of times throughout the season. And special teams play is going to play a factor in that. So when you look at the special teams depth chart on the initial depth chart for the Denver Broncos, you see the obvious kicker and punter names there and long snapper. And then it comes to kick return and punt return, where Marvin Mims is written in the darkest colored Sharpie that you can buy as an all-pro and Pro Bowl level returner for multiple years. But after that is where you start to see some names of guys who are going to be fighting for roster spots, specifically zeroing in on that kick returner slot there. Jaleel McLaughlin, in my mind, is the leader in the clubhouse for the 3rd running back spot on this team right now, primarily because he's a change of pace back who can provide speed and burst and a different skill set than the other guys without the ramp up of carries that's required for a guy like Audric Estime to get into that rhythm and that flow. So if Jaleel McLaughlin, who's been taking potential returner reps and snaps during training camp practices, is a viable backup or a dual option alongside Marvin Mims, and Tyler Bidet kind of falls into that category as well. He's good in pass protection. He's somebody who Sean Payton gave a playoff jersey in the game against the Buffalo Bills last postseason over Audric Estime, who was his draft pick from just a year ago, 2 years ago now. And Tyler Bidet has also been seen taking reps and snaps as a personal protector on special teams. So you're seeing guys like Jaleel, guys like Tyler Bidet, start to find footing and usage in the special teams realm that could help them cling to and solidify a rare and limited spot left in the running back room, which doesn't necessarily bode well for a guy like Audric Estime. And this initial depth chart is not going to be the end-all, be-all that decides it, but the preseason games will be. So starting this weekend, and as we go through the next handful of weeks here, these are the names that are going to be watching and speculated upon as to who fits best and where they fit going into this final 53-man roster. And as the preseason goes on, especially when we get to that final preseason game, specifically the third and fourth quarter of that final preseason game, we are really going to see who is on the block and who is going to make this roster just by the skin of their teeth. Getting tons of comments and reactions to the conversation we've had today. So as we often do on the show, I want to make sure that we give breath and time to those thoughts and reactions up here on the screen. And it can be about anything. If you want to leave a comment and chime in from the conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs and Bo Nix and the fear that AFC West and potentially NFL teams may have toward the Denver Broncos heading into 2025, it can be about the depth chart and the roster there. Here we have from Donald, get a goal and then work toward it. And your problem with that is exactly, I'm assuming he's referencing Sean Payton's putting out there that the Denver Broncos, he thinks are one of the only teams in 2025, the only teams in his career, 7 in total, that he believes can win a Super Bowl. And whether or not that he should say that, it's too early to say that, it's appropriate to say that. I'm with you, Donald. He was brought in to do this. He feels good about the direction that they're going, and he's never been one to duck the smoke or move away from it. So I'm all for it. The Broncos are Super Bowl contenders. It's at least in the realm of conversation, Eric. I agree with you. Will it happen in 2025? I don't know. There's only 2 teams that make it and 1 team that wins it out of 32 every single year. And specifically in the AFC, that path and that road to get there is tough when you've got the MVP dual perennial matchup between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson with the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. You've got a guy named Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs who've been a dynasty for a half a decade in the NFL. You've got the Houston Texans who are a scrappy upstart behind CJ Stroud. You've got the Chargers who are kind of always flirting with that wild card postseason berth with Jim Harbaugh and now Justin Herbert. And the Broncos are finding themselves right in there, just like the Bengals, who found themselves just on the other side, but who also have Joe Burrow, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and somebody that can basically throw and keep a team in almost any situation. So, Eric, could it happen this year? Sure. If it doesn't happen, does that devalue or diminish Sean Payton saying he thinks this team has the bones to do it? Absolutely not. Not in my opinion, at least. Look, I get it. Let's just let it play out before we anoint them as terrors of the NFL. Aaron, we're not anointing them, I don't think. Sean Payton may be anointing them by embracing them and having confidence in them to be able to be a Super Bowl contender, one of the only ones he's coached in his career, to be, for Bo Nix, a top 4 or 5 quarterback. Is maybe you could take that as he's prematurely anointing them. I take it as speaking confidently. But if anyone's anointing them, Matthew Berry is reporting these words about the Denver Broncos from a conversation he had for someone within the Chiefs organization. So if you're being anointed, but it comes from your peers and or the adversaries on your schedule, your opponents, is that really being anointed, or is that just validation of how you're viewed by those around you? Guess it's a little bit of splitting hairs there, but I don't know that necessarily they're being anointed more than they've been put on people's radar and people are acknowledging it. Sanders is in a do or die year, in my opinion. Yeah, Drew, listen, talk about a guy that just can't catch a break, right? Talk about a guy who had promise and potential coming out of the NFL, was a solid draft pick and choice for a guy like George Payton, and just that injury bug. Guy just can't stay on the damn field. And your heart goes out to and just kind of breaks for a guy like that. He's been moved around because he's got the potential and the flexibility on the defensive side of the ball to be something at the NFL level, but you can't make the club in the tub. And this is another year where Drew Sanders finds himself in that position. Can't make the club from the tub. There you go. Donald gets it. Donald gets it. How'd the joint practice go? Well, we did see it's going on right now. They didn't get started until a little bit before we got on the air here, and I would imagine they're still probably going right now. But we did get some updates. There were fans in attendance, and we did get an announcement that Clint Kubiak, or Clay Kubiak, one of the Kubiaks, is going to be calling the plays for the 49ers, who are not probably going to play a lot of their starters in the preseason because they're going to focus the energy on this joint practice. So if that tells you anything about the way that the mentality is for the 49ers heading into this, who, if you'll remember from, I don't know what it is, probably 6 years ago now, who came to Denver and smacked that ass for the Broncos and really set a poor tone for the start of that season. That's kind of how they're approaching it. Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton were both present and in attendance for the joint practice, but were not practicing, according to our 9 News Broncos insider, Mike Kliss. Obviously, both of them coming back from nursing injuries. Rob's Dre Greenlaw a little bit there of some potential get back from his former home, somebody that he left to come here to Denver, something that Talanoa Hufanga and Jaquan McMillan and Mike McGlinchey and DJ Jones, who all somehow came over from the 49ers, who are becoming a pipeline in free agency for the Denver Broncos, will get to experience. And that always feels like it's going to be a little spicy and a little testy, right? We saw Randy Gregory, if you'll remember, when Randy Gregory was a Bronco, when the Dallas Cowboys came to town for a joint practice, that dude was ready to fight his former teammates, and he wasn't even in pads practicing. So we will continue to monitor the likes of our own Andrew Mason from DenverSports.com and DenverSports 104.3 The Fan, who is out there on the scene. Mike Kliss, our 9 News Broncos insider, very, very dear friend of the station and the show, will be providing us updates all throughout the day. I will be sitting in alongside Zach By on the drive this afternoon from 2 to 6, where we will keep you plugged in on everything coming out of Santa Clara for the joint practices ahead of the official start of the preseason for your Denver Broncos. So much to get into. Thank you all so much for joining me. Love interacting with your comments during the show, and keep it coming. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on all of our social medias at Denver Sports 104.3, at DEN Sports 104.3, and just stay locked in, man. Nobody does football season like Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan on the air, with our talented lineup with Mark Schlereth and Brandon Stokely and Mike Evans and Philip Lindsay and Josh Dover and Cecil Lammy. You've got Denver Sports Tonight. You've got DenverSports.com with all of the information. Looking forward to hearing from you, Donald. Chime in on the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. But everything they got going on at DenverSports.com from Will Peterson and Jake Shapiro and Trent Finnegan and Andrew Mason, Cecil Lammy, James Marillat, just an absolute wealth of knowledge and information about all the local teams here in Denver, and not just the Broncos. But with the Broncos on the doorstep of the preseason, nobody does it better than Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. We'll catch you again tomorrow at noon.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.